I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander. And today we'd like to talk to you about stress made easy. That might sound like an odd topic, especially in light of the fact that we all seem today to live stressful lives. But the truth is that stress can be made easy and can be a positive part of our life. We all deal with stress, and we deal with it in different ways, and stress comes to us from different sources in life. There isn't one of us that avoids a stressful life.
Not if we're living. And we have to accept that stress is a necessary part of life, and it projects us along, it projects us into new and different avenues, and also it tests our mettle. We see then how well we're doing with life when we have stressful situations, and we're very wise if we do evaluate ourselves.
And stress, of course, sometimes can have a positive
Yeah.
aspect, or very often has a positive aspect. And one of the things I'm thinking about is so many people that do public speaking
Mm-hmm.
or who act
Mm-hmm.
will often say that just before their performance or just before their talk, they are so stressed
Mm-hmm.
and have so much fear even
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and yet that prepares them for the experience. Now, I'm not a person that has that
Stressed.
experience. Don't get stressed before I speak, but many people do, and that stress is actually a good thing as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so often in today's environment, we hear people in our counseling ministry and the church who talk often about how stressful their lives are. And because of the stress that they feel the burdens of life more uh, uh,
Painfully.
painfully. Yes, that's a good way to describe it. And I guess that negative stress is what we want to spend some time talking about in terms of how people can identify it, and secondarily, how after they identify it, if it's negative stress in their life, if it's a positive stress, then it's all right. But if
Okay.
it's negative stress, then I think there are ways that we can deal with that stress, and also understanding the reality that stress is going to be in our lives. So we're not talking at all about the avoidance of stress. And so often people will believe that that's what we're talking about. And in metaphysics, we talk so often about the power of the mind and the reality of the fact that our mind creates the environment for us. And so a lot of metaphysicians will often say that the way to deal with a stressful situation or stress in general is simply to deny its reality.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't talk about that, nor we don't teach that. We
No.
actually teach identifying and acknowledging the reality that there is stress in our lives. And now, if there's stress in our lives, is it good stress or is it bad stress? And if it's bad or negative stress, then what are some of the things that we can do to eliminate it?
To make the plan and work the plan, and that would do it. I used to do stress reduction workshops for a time, and it was simply meditation, teaching people to meditate and teaching people to go within and see what's causing the stress, and then to be perceptive enough to change whatever situation it was in their own mind, because sometimes you can't change the circumstances around you because it's dependent on other people's province to do that. But how we accept that is determining whether or not we're stressed out or whether we flow with it. So if we flow with the stress, then it's a positive. And if we balk at it and block, then it would be a negative in our lives, wouldn't it?
It would be, and you said something very profound, as you often do. But the stress that we have in our lives is really in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're stressed. And that really is true, because as people tell us about stress and as we experience stress ourselves, it's mental stress.
Mm-hmm.
It's the stress on our minds and on our spirits and on our being and on our consciousness. And that stress makes us weary and wears us down.
Yes, and it's our own perception of how things are coming into our lives and what we need to do about them. And if we feel helpless, if we feel any negativity, then we're not able to cope, and we realize we're not able to, and then we're stressed.
Mhm.
So we create our own stress through our own perception of the events around us.
Mhm. And as we become more stressed, so often it becomes a vicious cycle, much like depression
Yes.
and anger and some other, well, all emotions. It becomes
Mm-hmm.
secular.
Mm-hmm.
And this cycle is sometimes very difficult to break. Other aspect is that some people just really enjoy being stressed, and they enjoy communicating that, and it
Yes.
becomes a mechanism for them to either garner attention
Mhm.
or to be able to avoid responsibility. And so there are people who covet their stress, just like there are people who covet illness and who
Mhm.
covet depression and covet a variety of other things. So,
Yes, and that's a very important aspect, and I hope everyone listening will look within and see if that's the case with them. And I can remember my mother-in-law saying, "So and so enjoys illness and enjoys not being well," and so many people do. You're right. That's how they get attention. That's how they get acknowledged. That's how they get so that they feel life is worthwhile.
mhm. And this aspect of being stressed constantly then becomes a way of communicating their self-worth
Yes.
to themselves and to those around them. I often think of the times that I've gone to dinners or to social events, and where the host or hostess just spends an inordinate amount of time talking about how impossible it is for them to have a good time
Uh-huh.
because they're just so exhausted from this entire event. Well, that just shows how this issue of stress can creep into what we're doing because of all things. And one of the things that I think so often when I hear this saga, and I can't tell you how many times I've sat down to a beautiful dining room table with a wonderful group of people to have a magnificent evening, and the person who is our host or hostess is just so exhausted and telling us that. So then it becomes when this should be a very positive
Yes.
experience. And so in our lives, what we want to do is to do things that are positive and uplifting and just like entertaining
Yes.
our friends. Well, what's the point of entertaining our friends if it's so wearisome to us? And that's not what we need to have in life. We need to overcome the weary aspect and the stressful aspect and instead be empowered and really feel good.
Mhm.
And of course, the good hostess is the one that really draws strength from
Mhm.
putting the party together and then is so happy in the anticipation of her guests coming and then enjoys it so much that it becomes a positive and supportive experience.
Yes, and the secret and the key to that is planning, isn't it? If they plan things well and then execute their plan, carry through with their plan, then things would run much more smoothly. And a lot of people try and do too many things in too small amount of time, and then they're not happy with the results of either. And usually their guests could care less. The guests don't know nor care. If the guests just come together to visit and to eat and whatever they're served, that's fine. But it's the preconceived idea of the host or hostess that they have to do certain things, and if they don't do it just like that, then they are disappointed in themselves, and they feel that others couldn't care less.
And that goes to the heart of having unrealistic
Yes,
expectations
yes,
about ourselves and about an event.
hmm
And I think that happens so often. And I think it's very important for us to share with everyone that what brings us stress so often is not the dinner party, but what happened at that dinner party. And that is as you said, that the preparation
hmm
and the time constraints are really a reality. And in our lives today, we try to do too much.
hmm
And we try to do too much without enough preparation. And I'm not only talking about the physical aspects, but I'm talking also about mental and spiritual preparation for
hmm
daily living.
hmm
And if we don't do that necessary preparation, if we don't lay the groundwork, then we're really setting ourselves up for stress, aren't we? Yeah.
Yes, and there's a fine line. We need to plan, we need to do that, but we also need then to release, totally release. And they're equally important. And then if we totally release, we don't have those preconceived ideas that we're transferring to other people, and we're letting everyone else just do their own thing and be themselves. And we have laid the groundwork, we've put the event together, but we shouldn't try to control others. And when we do, we're in for trouble because it's not ever going to work out the way we anticipate because everyone thinks differently.
And that unrealistic expectation comes
hmm
back into the picture.
Yes,
And it happens, for instance, at work.
yes.
We may have an individual, or we ourselves may have someone for whom we work,
hmm
and that person may be terrible and may cause us a lot of stress. But the way that we respond and react to that is really determining the impact of that stressful event. And
hmm
so it goes back to our own dynamic of mind.
And it's our own, again, it's our own perception of what we perceive as we want to see things, how we want to see things happen. And if we think we want to just see things flow, then we're open to new and different aspects. And so, well, that would be the ideal, of course, to just flow. And I remember once someone said to me once, just flow. And it was, it's like, it's hard for people to know what flowing means. But to me, to just flow means that you do all the planning you can, you do everything you can in advance, and then you release the event to the universe just to transpire in its own natural way. And that's true with writing. When people write, if they try too hard to write one specific thing, then they get bogged down in the trying instead of the creativity of just letting ideas flow through them. And the same thing would be true with life, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And to allow that natural process of creativity to
Yes.
flow through
Yes.
overcomes the stress
Yes.
and the negative stress in our lives. Going back to that issue of relating to other people, a great deal of our stress really has to do with the way we think people ought to behave. And we're all guilty of that. We believe people ought to do a certain thing. They ought to say a certain thing. They ought to be a certain place. But in fact, we can't take responsibility, nor can we have unrealistic expectations about the fact that they are going to be the way we think they ought to be. They are the way they are. And there are a myriad of reasons why they are the way they are. And one of the things I think about now is people who have children, young children or teenagers especially, young adults, and how many families, and I'm just thinking, popping into my mind, people in our own church who are so unhappy with their children or so unhappy with their adult children because those children are not behaving the way that that parent believes they should.
Yes, but I think parents today are really one up on parents of a generation ago and farther back, because they're allowing their children to be themselves. And you know, the children are much more well behaved, generally speaking. I think it's wonderful to see these young children just being so happy and content, and at social events they don't like get into trouble with the adults if they have adults around them who allow them to just be.
And that importance of allowing ourselves to go with the flow and allowing the flow to be a part of our lives. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and give you an opportunity to receive some information that we think will be helpful to you in your study of the ideas and concepts that we're sharing.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
Going with the flow is what we were talking about before the break. And I guess as we go with the flow in dealing with stress, we should spend the last half of the program talking about ways that we can actually cope with stress. And one of the ways that we certainly would be remiss if we didn't discuss meditation. But I guess before we get into meditation, and as a preparatory comment about meditation, breathing becomes so important. And on this program, we've talked a lot about the importance of breathing, the importance from a mind, body, spirit standpoint, our physical being, our physical well-being, and our mental well-being, and the value of taking that deep breath and breathing deeply. And as we look at ways to deal with stress, identifying that it's always there, it's going to be there. But a good way is, as we were told by our mothers and a lot of other wise people in our youth, just take a deep breath. Isn't that that's the way?
Yes, and doesn't it, if we consciously do that, we can see the difference right away. And it's in every aspect of life. We can do that when we're dreading something, when we're talking on the telephone, and we don't really want to be talking on the telephone for various reasons. And we can do it before we exercise. We can do it if we practice deep breathing throughout the day, I guarantee by the end of the day we'll be half as tired or less than if we don't practice deep breathing. And a lot of physicists call it orgone energy. They call it prana. It's called many different things, chi, but it's the life force energy that enters our body with the oxygen, as we deep breathe. And it's real, it's palpable, and it's measurable. And it's measurable by us as to how we feel.
Right. And as we take a deep breath and we inhale and we exhale and we inhale and we exhale, not at that rate, but as we take these deep, practice deep breathing, we bring a calm to our being,
Yes.
and we bring a calm to our body as well.
Yes. I was talking with someone yesterday on the phone who called me for some advice, and I was just trying to put that together. And so I told her about the deep breathing, and I said, the first thing you need to do is when the first thing in the morning, breathe deeply, because she can't get out of bed without feeling that things are really, it's a terrible day and her health is impaired. And so and her health might be impaired, but it's probably impaired for the same reasons that we've been describing. So I explained to her to do the deep breathing, and I said, breathe to the inhale through your nostrils to the count of 8, hold it to the count of 4, and exhale through your mouth to the count of 8 and hold it to the count of 4. 8, 4, 8, 4. And she says, I'll do that. And I said, it doesn't matter what rhythm you establish. You can have another rhythm established that would do the same thing as the 8-4-8-4. I've just found that 8-4 is easier for more people. And she says, don't get me confused. I'm going to use 8-4-8-4. So that's a very important lesson, because we need to have a rhythm to our breathing. And if we do the deep breathing and the quick breathing, that's like the Lamaze breathing for birthing. So all those have a purpose. But if we want to be calm and peaceful, then we need to just take long in breaths, hold it, and then long out breaths, because we establish a rhythm of calmness that stays with us.
And we begin the process of centering.
Exactly.
Which is new to many of us in
Yes.
the West. But of course, in metaphysics and in New Thought, we've been involved in centering as a
Yes.
part of our prayer life and as a part of our meditation.
Yes.
In Eastern philosophy, of course, for centuries, the Eastern religious and spiritual leaders have known the value of centering. And centering is simply becoming one with the presence, isn't it?
That's right. Attuning yourself, and I say it, attuning yourself to Creator God. And that is what we do. And when we do that consciously, makes all the difference in the world, in our lives.
So at any time during the day, we could use this deep breathing exercise and combine it with the spiritual aspect of centering,
Yes.
and have tremendous benefits
Yes.
by simply being able to eliminate that stressful situation, or at least take the edge off of it, and then to bring ourselves into a more serene and perfected state.
Yes, and when we do, again, it's our own perception of the things around us that cause stress in our lives. And if we just put that thinking aside and concentrate on attuning ourselves, then it makes a difference. When we come out of that meditation, our perception is totally different. Nothing seems as critical or serious or terrible when we've consciously quieted ourselves.
Right. Now, the issue, as we talk so often about prayer and meditation, in the West, we're so used to praying,
Yeah.
which is typically talking to God, and
Yeah.
that we're accustomed to that. And we could do a whole program on that aspect of prayer, because metaphysical prayer is somewhat different than traditional or orthodox prayer techniques in many instances, because we use prayer not as a method of imploring necessarily, or going through our laundry list of needs, but instead attuning ourselves. But the aspect of prayer is dialogue, so to speak, with the divine, with the presence of God. And meditation is listening to God, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that, for us in the West, is a totally new concept, because I think it's so difficult for most people, especially who haven't even been introduced, have never had an experience with meditation in the past, to come to the realization that there can be something spiritual in silence.
Yes. Isn't that exciting? It would be such a pleasant surprise to those people who are stressed if they would just take time to meditate, take time to attune themselves, take time to just be silent within, and to find their own inner core of being. Makes all the difference in the world in the quality of life, doesn't it?
It does. And a beginning point for anyone is to simply begin the process of taking deep and rhythmic breaths, becoming quiet. It's better, obviously, for someone new. It's always better for any of us, but certainly for people new to the meditation and to meditation techniques, to go into a quiet place, or a quiet, controlled environment where there's less stress, or less distraction, I'm sorry. But than simply to go into the silence and to be quiet. And for people who don't want a religious aspect or have problem with the spirituality of it, it's very easy to do meditation from a secular standpoint.
Yes.
And there's nothing at all wrong with that.
Uh-huh.
And that simply is using the same technique, but simply going into that quiet time and opening ourselves to the peace that resides within ourselves and within the world, wherever we call it into being. And that's the magnificent thing about meditation, I think, and breathing, is that we can call that serenity into any place we find ourselves. Now, in the beginning, of course, many have to go apart to meditate, and as we said, that's certainly a benefit. But it's also a great benefit when we attune ourselves to such an extent that we're able to enter those moments of meditation anywhere. Yeah.
Yes, and we're in a meditative state when we listen to a good speaker, and we're in a meditative state when we're listening to anything that we're attuning. It's a certain type of meditative state. And if we can go into those meditative states when we're somewhat interacting with life, then we can go into a wonderfully quiet time of deep meditation, communing with the divine. And so it's all step by step, isn't it?
It is. Now, for new people that are just beginning or interested in meditation, and of course there are workshops and books and a lot of information, but just basically people simply need to do what?
Well, they just need to first breathe deeply, and establish that rhythmic pattern, and then attune their consciousness to the divine, and they can pray briefly, and they can call on those on the inner planes, Jesus or Buddha or whomever, that is important in their consciousness, and then it's a matter of detaching from the physical and just being in a state like you're being sustained. And it's hard to describe how you do that, but it's a process that works. And people who meditate for the first time find that it's helpful. There was a Jewish lady in my neighborhood who asked a young man to have me come to her home to teach, to give her a lesson on meditation. And she said to me in the very beginning, I don't want any religion thrown in. I just want to know how to meditate. And it was a good thing she said that, because it kept me on my toes and it kept me focused. So she got what she wanted in learning just to attune. And she said, that sounds so easy. And I told her it is. And it truly is, because it depends on our own consciousness of the next step after we do the deep breathing and the attunement. Then, and sometimes we may want to ask questions in our meditation and receive answers. So if we do, then that's valid. And just the first thing that comes to mind is what we accept and go with. And because we can't spend time arguing, is it going to be one or the other? We just need to flow with whatever comes and know that we are attuned to the divine. And so we can have a 1-minute meditation or 3-minute, or we can have 5-minute. And people used to meditate longer. A lot of people used to meditate like for an hour. I never meditated for an hour. I don't think it's a healthy thing to do, but because it's just a matter of preference, though. If someone wants to meditate longer, do. But everyone should know that you can gain a great deal of benefit from a very brief meditation, because it sets the pace for how you're facing life that day.
And at that moment.
At that moment.
And it also prepares you. The other wonderful thing that I think our viewers need to understand, and you said it very well when you talked about the Jewish lady who came and asked you to teach meditation, is that meditation transcends religion and transcends spiritual tradition. And so we need to understand that we're not talking about anyone needing to change their church or faith. And when we do meditation workshops, or when we participate in meditation circles and groups, we welcome people of all faith traditions. And we do meditation, you and I, in the Christian tradition, because that's our tradition, that's our faith. But just because that's our faith doesn't mean that it has to be the faith for everyone. And that's a really important distinction between metaphysical New Thought philosophy and some other religious and spiritual groups. We're not talking about anybody changing their faith or their religion. We're talking about being inclusive
Yes.
And the principles that we're talking about can be applied by people of any faith
Yes.
to empower and strengthen their life. And meditation is a technique that can be used across denominational lines.
And is.
And is widely.
And as you know, I do past life therapy work, and there were 7 young ladies who came to me for past life therapy sessions, separately, of course, and they were all Buddhists. They were all from the same Buddhist group, and I thought that was quite interesting and very lovely. It was a good experience for me that they accepted that although they're Buddhists, that I respect their religion and their beliefs and their faith. And when anyone of another faith comes to me for help, I love it. It's so special because it makes me feel, yes, I've succeeded in what I set out to do, to be a universal teacher, not just to exclude anyone or anything.
Right.
And you do that too.
We do. We embrace that concept.
Yes.
And because of that, I think we have a lot of interfaith activity at our fellowship, and all New Thought organizations do. And that goes back to our philosophy and New Thought metaphysics that inclusiveness creates within itself an elimination of stress. And stress comes when we are exclusive,
Yes.
and stress, it dissipates when we're inclusive.
Exactly. And another way to say that is stress comes when we try to force anything in life. If we try to force another person, if we try to force circumstances, if we try to force in our work or in our leisure or whatever, if we try to force anything, then we're looking for trouble and we're finding it. But if we just don't try to force anything or anyone, and who wants to change anyone's religious belief? It's a wonderful thing that we have diversity. It's a wonderful thing that everyone has their own choice. And life is a series of choices.
It is. And with that philosophy and with that approach, you can see that we can eliminate stress, and the stress can indeed be made easy. We hope that the concepts and ideas that we've shared with you today about confident living were helpful and useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.